Hey everybody, this is Sam Stevens, Greybull Wildlife Biologist. I'm going to be covering some of the proposed changes for hunt areas within my district, which is the Greybull Biologist District, which ranges from Tinsleep Canyon up to the Montana line and out to the western end of Bighorn County. So we'll start with Carter Mountain Pronghorn, hunt areas 78, 81, and 82. This is a population that is currently within its objective range, although it is on the bottom end. We think we saw a slight decrease that could have been largely due to increased winter severity from last year. However, things are still doing relatively well in that population. We do see some suppression in the fawn productivity and recruitment rate, and additionally we also see the buck ratio decreasing over the past few years. So changes for 2024 that we're looking at is to moderate some of the buck harvest in hunt areas 78 and 81 with some slight reductions there. Additionally, we're also looking to back off some of the doe harvest in hunt area 78 with the elimination of the type 7 license and also a slight decrease to the type 6 license. Moving east to the Copper Mountain Pronghorn herd unit, this is hunt area 79. This is a population that's always been managed pretty conservatively. We have a pretty limited type 1 license, which is restricted to half a mile of irrigated land, and then we also have a type 9 archery only license. We don't have any changes proposed for this year. However, it is interesting to note that we've seen similar trends within hunt area 79 that we're seeing across the river in the Carter Mountain Pronghorn herd unit, being that we saw a slight decrease in fawn ratio from this past year and also a pretty significant decrease in the buck ratio. So moving on to deer. The Shoshone River herd unit, which is hunt areas 121, 122, and 123, this is the lower Shoshone River, is also considerably below objective. Right now we're looking at just over 2,000 deer. This is an objective of 5,000 animals, and this is one that's likely due to increase in CWD prevalence. The most recent 3-year average was around 40%, and we've seen it pretty steady ever since 2019. That prevalence rate hover between 30 and 40 to even as high as 50 some years. The fawn ratio on top of that has also been relatively stagnant. Prior to 2018, we were seeing exceptional fawn productivity in this herd, and it was really cranking out a lot of deer, and yet the last 5 years we've seen that fawn recruitment rate really stagnate, and so we're not seeing that recovery. On top of that, you see the harvest within the herd track proportionately with what the abundance is doing, and so as you can see, the previous 5-year average, we were harvesting around 500 animals, and now we're down to just over 300. And so as far as proposals, the only thing that we have as far as changes this year is just an adjustment to our hunt area 121 type 6 license, which is to start that on August 15th, and that's specifically trying to address some damage concerns within that hunt area. So moving south to the Greybull River mule deer herd, this is hunt areas 124 and 165. Hunt area 124 is managed as a general unit. 165 is actually a limited quota unit. And similar to the Shoshone River, this is also a herd that's really been hit pretty hard by CWD. We're seeing rates between 40 and 50% from year to year. On top of that, the population estimates have really crashed in recent years, and proportionately our harvest is way down from where it used to be. Similarly, our fawn productivity and recruitment rate have also really come down, and so we just haven't seen that recovery within the herd. However, this last year we did see it uptick just slightly back up to 70 fawns per 100, so we're hoping that that's an indication that this thing could recover, although with that high of CWD prevalence, it's unlikely that it's going to be able to really bounce back. And so as far as proposals for this year, the only thing that we have listed is to restrict any doe harvest in Area 165 on the Type 1 license. And again, this is an area that last year we restricted any antlerless harvest within the general season in Area 124. And so we're looking to maintain some of those conservative changes that we made in the previous year. So moving east to the Paint Rock Mule Deer herd, hunt areas 41, 46, and 47. This is a herd that's on the lower end of its population objective at just around 7,000 animals. The objective, which was set in 2023 after a 5-year review, is 8,000 animals. This is a herd that's doing relatively well compared to the past few years. And so, for one, we're seeing CWD prevalence relatively stable for the time being. The most recent 3-year average was 17%. It's hovered right around 18% for the past 5 years. The fawn productivity in the herds also increased the last 3 years. In 2021, it increased to 66 fawns per 100 does. In 22, up to 75 fawns per 100 does. And then this last year, it stayed at a higher rate, up at 72 fawns per 100 does. On top of that, the buck ratio has also increased this past year, and so we saw it jump up from 20 per 100 in 22 up to 35 per 100 in 23. And this is largely being driven by an increase on the yearling buck per 100 doe ratio, up to 19 per 100, which is significantly higher than what we've seen in 20 years. The harvest has also been relatively stable, but also on a slight increasing trajectory. We harvested 649 mule deer this past year, and that's compared with a 640 5-year average. So we have 2 proposed changes for the Paint Rock herd in 2024. The first of which is a proposed reduction of the non-resident Region R quota from 600 down to 500. This is largely in response to hunters' dissatisfaction rates increasing, and on top of that, just a general sentiment that we hear from folks in the fall expressing some discontent over the amount of hunter crowding that they're seeing, specifically in some of the mountainous areas on public land. And some of this can be corroborated with the fact that we've lost a significant contingent of deer down low in some of the ag land regions of Region R. A lot of that's being driven by CWD, and so we're seeing more and more people starting to hunt up on the slope on BLM or on forest, and I think it's starting to lead to a perception of hunter crowding. And so the last time that non-resident R quota was reviewed was in 2018, and if you go back and you look at the amount of deer that we were counting down low, that allowed for some of that hunter pressure to be more evenly distributed, it was a significantly higher number of deer down low than what we're seeing now. And the second proposed change is the removal of the Type 1 licenses. So these were 2 license types that were created in 2022 in an attempt to target and harvest some older age class buck mule deer with a later season, targeting them during the rut when they would be more vulnerable. So the Type 1 late season tags from the 2023 harvest, we harvested 39 bucks, which was relatively an 85% success rate. The average age on those deer was 5.5. If you compare that with 2022, the average age that year was around 6. And just to give you a sense of what it looks like in the general season buck mule deer harvest typically is going to range between 3 and 4. And so to the extent that we were trying to target some of those older age class individuals, it was successful. However, when we sampled that subset of animals that were taken with these Type 1 limited quota licenses, CWD prevalence from 2023 was only 9%. If you go back and you look at 2022, CWD prevalence from that year was only 5%. And so on one hand, we were successful in targeting some of those older age class deer, but we were not successful in taking out some of those CWD positive animals. And so this was one of the reasons why this was experimental, and we left some of these license quotas relatively low. We wanted it to be a probe to see, to test the efficacy of a late season tag like this within this herd unit. And I think after 2 years of running it, we don't see a lot of merit specifically in this herd unit. We might use this tool, elsewhere in the future, but for now, doesn't seem like it's doing what it was intended. And so we're looking at removing these type 1 licenses for 2024. This is a trend that we've continued to see since we started pulling teeth on a lot of these harvested deer within the paint rock herd, and the type 1 licenses enabled us to gather a better sample size from some of these older age class individuals. So bucks in that 4.5 to 7.5 year old range, we get to get a better representation of how their antlers develop at that age. And the one thing that seems unique to the bighorns, specifically to this herd unit, seems to be that antlers are fairly slow to develop, and this could be related to habitat, productivity, genetics. We're not entirely sure yet, but one thing that does seem to be pretty consistent from year to year is that the maximum outside spread of on antler width is plateauing right around 4.5 years of age, right around 20 inches, and they're not getting out to that 25 to 30 inch wide range that you might find in western or southern Wyoming. So some other monitoring that we are continuing is our GPS collaring work. This is something that we started back in 2021, and as you can see on the chart on the right, the big take home from last year was that we had extremely high annual survival. And so while a lot of people were hearing about all the carnage and the severe adult mortality that people were seeing in western and southern Wyoming, we actually saw relatively high survival rates within the paint rock herd of 86%. Normally, an average healthy mule deer population is going to range between 80 and 85% survival on an annual basis. So as you can see, we were kind of just right within the wheelhouse there. This is compared to about 92% survival, which is what we saw in 2022. And as you can see, we've maintained about 60 doe mule deer fitted with GPS collars since then. This is a project that was initiated largely in response to both significant population declines, which have been seen within this herd, and also the fact that it's sort of the leading edge of CWD spread from south to north across the west slope of the Bighorns. And so on top of that, we also wanted to know what was driving this population decline, if it was in fact CWD, or if there were some other variables at play that were keeping this population suppressed. And as you can see, CWD is a significant cause of mortality within the herd, but it definitely seems to be more pronounced on the southern end in hunt area of 41. Another thing we're learning from this project is it seems pretty evenly split between these deer, whether or not they're resident or migratory deer. Seems like the more migratory portion of the population persists in hunt area 47, whereas the more resident deer live in hunt area 41. So moving north to the North Bighorn mule deer herd. So this is a herd that's shared with the Sheridan region. I'll talk just about hunt areas 50 through 53. This is a population that is below the population objective of 20,000 deer. Right now, the most recent estimates are about 13,500. And again, this is an estimate that includes both the west slope and the east slope. Fawn productivity and recruitment in this herd has been relatively low. On the west side, we've seen it pretty stagnant, right around 60 fawns per 100 does for the past 5 years now. And on top of that, our buck ratio has also been relatively stagnant. Harvest has also been stagnant. We've seen it right around about 350 deer for the last 5 years now. This is a herd that, similar to the paint rock herd, we also started fitting some of these deer with GPS collars, trying to monitor and some of the movements and also document cause-specific mortality within the herd. We've had GPS collars out now since 2020 in this population, and survival from year to year ranges anywhere from 70% up to around 90%. The highest year was 2022 at 93%, and then as you can see, this most recent year was 85%, which again was relatively higher than what we saw statewide. The one unique thing about this project from this last year is that we're now starting to collar fawns, and so currently we have 68 fawn mule deer fitted with GPS collars. Those collars will drop in June, and so this is really just trying to monitor their vital rates during the critical late winter, early spring period. So we'll just try to get a sense of what survival looks like from January to June, which the outcome of that is a pretty good indicator of whether or not your population is going to grow or decline from year to year. As you can see from last year, our survival rate of our fawns was 78%, which is definitely above average. So season proposals for the North Bighorn herd on the west slope. We don't have anything specific to hunt areas. However, again, this is looped into non-resident region R. We are looking to reduce that quota from 600 down to 500. So white-tailed deer, we kind of separate this out. White-tailed deer within the basin are managed kind of as their own herd unit, but specific to some of the hunt areas that I've already covered, the main changes that we're looking at in 2024 is first the allowance of hunting hunt area 46, which is the forested portion of the paint rock herd unit, with a 41 type 8 and a 47 type 8 license. And this is trying to target increased abundance of white-tailed deer does, which is what we're starting to see up on the forest, both on the northern and the southern end of hunt area 46. In addition to that, we're also looking at an increase of type 8 tags in hunt area 122 to address some crop damage concerns, and then also looking to back off the hunt area 124 type 3 any white-tailed deer licenses from 150 down to 100. And this is in response to some of the losses which we've incurred through losing some of these walk-in areas down on the Greybull River. Okay, so moving on to elk, we'll start up north with the North Bighorn elk herd. So similar to the North Bighorn deer herd, this is one that's shared by both the Sheridan and the Cody regions. So I'll talk just specifically about hunt area 39 and hunt area 40. What we're seeing right now in hunt area 39 is an overabundance of elk. As you can see, our sub-objective is 500 elk on the trend count, and last year we counted 1,800 elk. And some of this could have been driven by the fact that we experienced a really mild winter, and also a lot of grass from last year's increased precipitation. And so we definitely had an overabundance of elk that I think normally would have migrated north into Montana, but this last year they didn't, and so we probably had an excess of 1,200 elk that got included in that annual trend count. Conversely, just to the south in hunt area 40, we've been below the sub-objective of 850 for the last few years now. We were up slightly in 23 at 411 elk from 279, but still not quite where we'd like to be relative to those specific sub-objectives. So for proposed changes, the first thing I'll talk about here is the removal of the antlerless season in the for hunt area 40 type 1 licenses. So this is something that we started back in 21, which was allowing these guys to come back after the any elk season ended on November 4th and hunt with a cow tag till the end of the month. Both this change and then also the the next bullet down, the elimination of the Type 5 licenses, are both intended to try to moderate some of that elk harvest. So if you saw, our sub-objective in Hunt Area 40 is 850 elk. We've been significantly below that for 3 years now, and so we're trying to back some of that off, and on top of both trying to increase our count within Area 40, we're also looking at trying to facilitate some early October elk movement back into Hunt Area 40. On top of that, we're also looking at just some slight adjustments to the 40 Type 6 licenses, and that's in response to some early season crop damage concerns on Shell Creek. And then back up at the top of the chart here, we're looking at reducing the 39 Type 9 quota from 100 down to 75 in response to some hunter crowding concerns that we heard from archers. So moving south to the Medicine Lodge elk herd, so Hunt Areas 41 and 45. Similar to the northern end, this is a herd that's managed with a trend count objective, and so the most recent 3-year average was 2,515, which actually puts us within 20% of our trend objective of 2,200. The harvest within this herd unit has been relatively good up until this last year. We saw, due to some of the really dry, mild conditions and lack of snow, we really lacked on elk harvest in Hunt Area 41. It was okay in 45, but as I'll get to in a second, that's not necessarily where we need to be harvesting a lot of elk. So specific to Hunt Area 41, which has always kind of been the problem child of this herd unit, we have an overabundance of elk on the north end of the unit that we've been trying to target for several years now. And as you can see, 2022 was a pretty good year for elk harvest, and so we harvested, close to 500 elk in Hunt Area 41, which is an all-time high, and a lot of that was facilitated by really good precipitation and winter conditions, which came early and stuck around throughout December. And as you can see, a lot of those trends really got reversed in 23 due to the opposite phenomenon, and we harvested only 135 cows, and our bull harvest still stayed relatively high. A lot of that was driven by the creation of Type 3 licenses, which I'll get to in a moment. So again, the Medicine Lodge trend count objective, as you can see, the Hunt Area 41's really been carrying the weight from the trend count. So despite the fact that we are down closer to where we'd like to be the last 2 years now, we're still counting an overabundance of elk in Hunt Area 41. And so the sub-objective within that hunt area is 1,300 elk, and we've been up around 1,600 elk the last 2 years, which is an improvement from where it was, but still not where we'd like to see it. And then moving southward into Hunt Area 45, you can see that with a sub-objective of 900, we haven't met that for the last few years now, and so we'd like to kind of balance that scale a little bit. So as far as proposed changes, the first thing I'll touch on here is the reduction of the Type 3 licenses. So this is a license type that was created in 2022 in response to an overabundance of elk that were really just residents living up on the rim of Shell Canyon and some of the northern end of Hunt Area 41. And this has really been a pretty successful license. Folks have really taken advantage of it. But it seems like our bull ratios declined a little bit in the last couple years, and so before we adjust the Type 1 to the Type 2 quota, we're looking to back some of these Type 3 tags off just a little bit, since success rates have remained elevated the last 2 years. Next, we're looking at extending the Type 4 season until November 30th, and this is due to two things. One, because we're getting rid of that early season October 1st to the 10th, and similar to the change that we're proposing in Hunt Area 40 with the Type 5 license, we're trying to facilitate some of that early October elk movement down into the Shell Canyon area, and kind of prime that hunt area for October 15th. And secondly, it's because we're looking at getting rid of a December hunting season with the Type 6 licenses and replacing it with a 3-week January season from the 1st to the 21st. So the intent here is to try to create a month-long break. So elk hunting will shut down on December 1st, and these Type 6 guys will come back on January 1st. And our hope here is that this will give those elk a month to settle down, hopefully also bring on some more winter-like conditions, which always increases elk harvest and makes for better hunting. And so we'll try this, I think, for a year or two, but for now this is what we have proposed for Area 41. Next line down, we're also looking at decreasing the Type 9 tags just slightly from 150 down to 125. And then finally, the only proposed change in Hunt Area 45 is to create a special archery season for the Type 7 license holders, and also to back that quota off from 200 to 100. So moving to bighorn moose, I'll talk specifically about Hunt Area 42, but Hunt Area 42 is managed as part of the bighorn moose population and herd unit, which is areas 1, 34, and 42. Trend count is still relatively above the objective of 110 moose. Productivity seems pretty good within this herd unit. Harvest has increased slightly the past few years in response to increased quotas, but we're actually looking to back some of those off this following year. So one thing that we're trying to address within the bighorn forest is trying to promote some more quality moose habitat. So in the left photo here, you see kind of more degraded, marginal, and eroded riparian habitat, which is pretty common across a lot of the bighorn forest. And then on the right here, you see just the opposite. This is a place that, is holding a lot of water. You're seeing good age class diversity from a lot of those willow species. And why is that? Well, it's because there's beavers damming up that creek bottom. And something that we've really identified over the past few years is a lack of beavers on the Bighorn National Forest. So some reconnaissance flights that we did back in 2021 indicated that to the extent that there's beaver activity or sign on the Bighorn Forest, most of it was inactive or relic sign. So to remedy that, in 2022, we started beaver translocation efforts on the forest. We translocated 20 problem beavers, moved them back up onto the forest in places that they've been extirpated. And then again in 2023, we moved an additional 7 beavers. So the overarching goal here is to improve some of this willow riparian habitat and hopefully increase the carrying capacity of our moose population. And our one proposed change for Hunt Area 42 is to decrease our 42 Type 4 licenses from 6 down to 2. So finally, moving up to the Devil's Canyon bighorn sheep herd, this is Hunt Area 12. This is a population that has now experienced 2 pretty dramatic decreases due to some disease outbreaks from a novel pathogen, Mannheimia hemolytica. So as you can see, the most recent trend count, which was in 2023, was 142 sheep. And as you can see outlined in red there, this is a count which predated the second disease outbreak, which started in late July of last summer and extended all the way through August. We can get into the details a little bit later, but for now, just know that the most recent estimate, to the best of our knowledge, we're estimating that there are around 30 ewes, 5 lambs, and 32 rams left within the herd. So this disease outbreak began in October of 2022, and it lasted through about December of that first year. And we estimated that we lost about 44% of the population after that first outbreak. The second outbreak, as I stated earlier, started in late July and lasted through the month of August of 2023. We're not entirely sure as to what the overall impact was from the second outbreak, but we do know that of 13 collared animals which we had on the ground, we lost 11 of those, so that's an 85% decline of the marked individuals. As you can see in the proposed changes at the top here, we're looking at increasing the type 1s from 2 to 3, and also creating a new license type, which is a type 2, and that is any ram less than 3/4 curl. And we're looking at giving out 5 licenses there. Why are we doing that? The main reason is because while the second die-off did have a massive impact on ewes, it did not seem to impact the rams. So our concern is that we have an overinflated ram ratio currently, and there's a chance that this population could bounce back and recover from this particular pathogen. However, what we don't want to happen is an overabundance of rams to show up come next breeding season looking for the ewes that are no longer there, which would then encourage them to disperse, go elsewhere, and potentially transmit and pick up some new pathogen, bring it back to the population, which would compromise the future recovery of the population. And so that's why we're looking at increasing some of this ram harvest for the time being. And if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call at 307-272-2470. You can also contact Corey Class, the Wildlife Management Coordinator, at the Cody office, 307-527-7125. You can also submit comments. Just make sure that if you do submit comments, you do it before 5 p.m. on March 29th. Thanks for listening.